want to send this out to my fellow diaspora Jews, which is just to say Jews outside of Israel, who might be very confused, bewildered, perplexed, upset, indignant, offended, heartbroken, that Jews in your life see things the way I do. Which is to say that in this moment, they are standing in full solidarity with Palestine, which means opposing Israel. And maybe they're just opposing Israel's actions, and maybe they're opposing Israel's existence in its current form. But either way, they've deviated from the script that you thought they would follow, or that they were raised to follow. They've come to some different conclusions. Now, I want you to know that making this video isn't easy for me, because in this moment, I gotta say, you, not you personally, but this category of non-Israeli Jews, are the people that I'm the most angry at, trigger in me the deepest feelings of disgust and disappointment, and generally speaking are the ones I have the strongest feelings about. Israeli Jews I can understand. You know, they're living in a situation where their government is basically holding them hostage and terrorizing them with propaganda every day, plus they're traumatized by the events that actually took place in their country a couple of months ago, and their government is exploiting that. It's a different situation. And I feel in less of a position to judge Israeli Jews per se, even though I hold them accountable for the actions that they go along with, and I think they're going to have to live the consequences of them, but I don't have as much skin in the game as I do with the Jews of my community here in North America and affiliated Jewish communities in Europe and elsewhere. And I have even more scorn and strong negative feeling because, in my opinion, we Jews have a lot less to worry about here, wherever we are, than Jews do in Israel. So to me, there's less of an excuse. And the way I'm seeing Jews currently inflate the dangers of anti-Semitism, I'm not saying invent them. They're real. They're out there. But inflate them and conflate them with all kinds of very valid criticisms of Israel and chants of freedom, chants, C-H-A-N-T-S, of freedom, liberation, and resistance, with words like intifada that just mean uprising, which just means resisting oppression as the underdog by any means necessary, which, by the way, is the story of Hannukah, which we're currently celebrating. Conflating that with calls for Jewish genocide is just so dishonest. It's just so dishonest. And I see so many Jews working themselves up into a lather, and it strikes me as completely disingenuous. It's just a way of justifying not standing up on your own 2 feet and using your own 2 eyes and seeing what's really going on, which is that the home team is committing some flagrant fouls and is no longer worth rooting for. So you can see I get pretty activated by that. There's a lot of pain around that for me. Always has been, ever since I was a kid. That the community that wants to claim me and that I would love, ideally, to be a part of, has an insane worldview. A worldview that I just don't agree with. And is trying to manipulate me into seeing it that way, and has been trying to do it all my entire life. And even more so these days with kids. Which, if you've seen the Israelism documentary, you know full well. So it's difficult for me to form a respectful, kind, compassionate message to you sometimes. I tried to do this earlier in the day. I couldn't. I was just too sick to my stomach. But there are moments of brightening and lightening, and this is one of them. So I'm going to try to use this moment to say something useful to you. I want to speak to your confusion and your disappointment and your bewilderment at your friends and loved ones who are not supporting Israel in this moment. I want you to know something, and this is maybe the bad news off the bat, although I don't consider it bad news, but you've lost them permanently. They're gone. I don't necessarily mean that your personal relationship with them is over. That could happen, that might not happen, I don't know. That's up to what you each have the bandwidth for. But ideologically, they are gone and they're not coming back. The door swings one way. It doesn't work in the opposite direction. You don't start out as a fierce Jewish pro-Palestinian activist and then you learn something about, I don't know, rapes or beheadings or other allegations or even other facts, and suddenly switch back to, oh no, you're right, actually my Hebrew school teacher was right. No, once you've seen it, the door swings one way, and it moves you closer and closer to, no longer being able to see Israel as the good guy. That's just how it goes. So you can give up on trying to convince them. Now, as for whether they should be trying to convince you, that's for them to decide. They may never be able to convince you. You might be too dug in. You might be too convinced that Israel is the safe refuge for the Jews. I mean, I really want to ask you, how's that going for us? But you may still believe it, and you may not be convincible that it's not true. But if you want to understand where these people in your life who think the way I do are coming from, I invite you to give up this nonsense about they're betraying their people, they're abandoning their people. The same thing that was said about Vietnam-era protesters. You're against the troops. Same thing in the Iraq War. And realize that for them, what they're doing is true patriotism. What they're doing is true Jewishness. They're doing it because they connect to something different than you do and identify with something different than you do as the essence of Jewishness. And that is a set of universal moral principles and ethical practices and intellectual willingnesses and emotional bandwidth that extends compassion to all people and accountability to ourselves first and fucking foremost. That's the lesson they took from their Torah portion on their bar mitzvah. That's the vow they made with Hashem, if they ever did. Or just with their own ancestors, which are your ancestors too. And they have a different relationship with their ancestors than you do. They took a different lesson from your ancestors' murder and destruction in the gas chambers. Just like I take a different lesson than you do from the murder and destruction of my great-grandparents. And the fact that I almost wasn't born because my dad almost didn't make it out of the Budapest ghetto. And that's my patriotism. That's my loyalty. And it just is the case that the way it goes in history is when people wake up, they wake up out of their nationalist, tribalist grievances and allegiances, and they wake up out of their fear and paranoia-based mindset that keeps them small and constrained and saying the whole world is against us. And they wake up into a more expansive, warmer view that feels a lot better in the heart, but boy oh boy does it hurt to see the reality, and boy oh boy does it hurt to go against the loved ones in their lives, aka you. And they're doing it anyway. Well, there must be a word for that beyond cowardice and treason, and I think it's courage, I think it's fortitude, I think it's integrity. Now, if you can appreciate and acknowledge that, then you have a chance of that relationship still being worth something after this. And let's all pray together that there is an after this.